Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Hebrews chapter 12.
It's a great one.
Oh, it's packed with so much. We're talking imagery, tough concepts.
Yeah.
And we've got a whole bunch of sources to help us unpack it all.
Yeah, I'm excited. What's really cool about Hebrews 12 is that it's almost like a pep talk, for the long haul of faith.
Oh, interesting.
It's like it starts by saying, hey, remember all those people who came before you, like this great cloud of witnesses.
Right.
And then it dives into this whole idea of God's discipline and how that's connected to his love.
Mm-hmm.
And it points us toward this unshakable kingdom. So get ready for like a super inspiring, maybe a little bit uncomfortable journey.
I love it. I have to say, one of the things that really struck me when I first read this chapter was this image of running a race with endurance.
Yeah.
We talk about pushing through challenges, but how does that translate to faith?
Right.
What does that even mean?
I think that's where things get really interesting, because it's not just about gritting your teeth and powering through.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrews 12:1-3 tells us to strip off anything that weighs us down, especially sin that can so easily entangle us.
Oh, yeah.
It's like getting rid of all that stuff that slows us down, those bad habits,
right,
or those thought patterns that kind of trip us up. But more importantly, it's about fixing our eyes on Jesus.
Because he's not just somebody cheering us on from the sideline.
Right, exactly.
The writer calls him the pioneer and perfecter of our faith.
Yes.
Those are some powerful words.
Big words.
What do they even mean for us, practically speaking?
Right.
How does Jesus' role as pioneer and perfecter actually impact how we live out our faith?
So thinking about those titles, I think those are really crucial to understanding this whole race.
Okay.
So as pioneer, Jesus blazed the trail for us.
Yeah.
He was the first to fully embody faith and to show us what a life of complete obedience to God looks like, right?
But he doesn't just leave us hanging to figure it out on our own.
Right.
He's the perfecter of our faith.
Okay.
So he's actively involved in our journey, guiding us, empowering us to grow. It's almost like having the ultimate coach.
Oh, I love that.
Someone who not only ran the race perfectly, but is right there beside us, helping us get to the finish line.
Yeah. It's like he's saying, look, I know this is hard, but I've been there. I'm with you. But then it talks about Jesus enduring the cross for the joy set before him.
Yes.
I struggle with that a little bit. How do we find joy in suffering, especially when it feels so heavy?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people grapple with.
Yeah.
But, what's amazing is that Jesus, his focus wasn't on the pain of the cross itself. He saw beyond that to the joy of accomplishing his mission, the joy of reconciling us to God.
Yeah.
And I think that's the takeaway for us, this challenge, to shift our perspective, to look beyond the immediate pain and focus on the bigger picture.
What if, like Jesus, we approached our challenges not with, resentment or despair, but with a sense of purpose?
Right.
Knowing that even in those dark moments, there's a greater joy waiting for us on the other side.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how all of this connects to endurance.
Oh, yeah.
But then we get to this concept of God's discipline. And honestly, it's a little unsettling for me.
I get that.
So how do we reconcile this idea of God disciplining us with his love?
Right.
Those two things seem contradictory.
It can feel jarring, yeah, even a bit harsh. But the writer uses this analogy of an earthly father disciplining his son.
Okay.
To help us understand, think about it, a loving father corrects his child, not out of anger, but because he wants what's best for them.
Okay.
He wants to see them grow.
So it's about shaping us.
Yes.
It's not about punishing us, but helping us to become the best versions of ourselves.
Exactly. It's about helping us grow into the people that God created us to be. And there's this beautiful reassurance in verse 11. Now, all discipline seems painful at the time, not joyful. But later it produces the fruit of peace and righteousness for those trained by it. It's like that feeling you get after a tough workout. It's painful in the moment, but afterwards you feel amazing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So we're talking about spiritual growth then.
Yeah.
But how is that different from, the way maybe our parents might have disciplined us?
Right. And that's a really key distinction the writer makes.
Okay.
Our earthly fathers disciplined us as they saw fit, which, let's be honest, wasn't always perfect.
Right.
But God's discipline, it comes from a place of perfect love and wisdom. He knows exactly what we need. And his correction, though it might be tough at times, is always for our ultimate good.
So it's for our benefit.
It is. And ultimately, it's about helping us share in his holiness, becoming more like him.
Okay, so God's discipline is for our benefit. But how does that tie into the call to holiness in verses 14, 17?
I think those two are totally intertwined. You can't have one without the other.
Okay.
Because the pursuit of holiness, becoming more Christ-like, requires a willingness to be corrected, to let God, shape us. It's this ongoing process of surrendering our will to His and letting Him purify our hearts.
That's not always easy, though.
Yeah.
Especially when it says to pursue peace with everyone. We live in a world that's, anything but peaceful.
Right.
So why is holiness so essential to see the Lord? That seems like a high bar.
It is a high bar.
Yeah.
But it gets to the very heart of who God is.
Okay.
God is holy, absolutely perfect, and because of that, sin just can't stand in His presence.
Right.
So the call to holiness is really an invitation to draw near to God.
Wow.
To become more like Him, not just in our actions, but in our very character.
It's like we're being prepared for something much bigger, something we can't even fully grasp right now.
Yeah.
And these warnings in these verses, they're serious. It talks about becoming like a bitter root, poisoning those around us, or like Esau, who traded his birthright for one meal.
Right.
What are we supposed to learn from that?
I think those are wake-up calls. They highlight the danger of taking God's grace for granted. Choosing temporary satisfaction over what's truly valuable and lasting. Imagine trading your entire inheritance for just one meal.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds ridiculous when you put it like that.
It does.
Yeah.
But how often do we do the same thing spiritually?
That's so true. I know I've been guilty of that.
Yeah.
Chasing those fleeting pleasures instead of what truly matters.
Yeah.
But it takes effort, doesn't it? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is. It's a marathon. And those temptations, they're always there, trying to trip us up.
Yeah. And that's why Hebrews 12 is so powerful. It's not just about explaining these ideas.
Right.
It's about motivating us.
Yeah.
Equipping us for the long haul.
Yes. And this whole idea of enduring hardship, striving for holiness, right, all leads to one of the most striking contrasts in this chapter, Mount Sinai versus Mount Zion.
The imagery there is incredible.
It is.
So on the one hand, we've got this terrifying scene at Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Where people were so overwhelmed by God's presence, they were like, please stop talking.
Right.
And then we have this breathtaking picture of Mount Zion.
Yes.
The city of the living God.
Joy, celebration.
The spirits of the righteous made perfect.
It's a powerful contrast, isn't it? It highlights the privilege we have as believers. We don't approach God with fear and trembling like those at Sinai. Yeah. We come to Him through Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant.
Wait, hold on. New covenant. I think some of our listeners might need a little bit more on that.
You're right. That's key. The new covenant's all about a new way of relating to God. The old covenant, represented by Mount Sinai, was based on law and fear. But the new covenant, represented by Mount Zion, is based on grace and love, made possible through Jesus' sacrifice.
So instead of cowering at the foot of the mountain terrified, we can approach God with confidence.
Exactly. And that's why the writer says, take care not to refuse the one who is speaking. It's an invitation to listen to God's voice through His Son.
This is amazing. This is a whole different way of relating to God than what I grew up with. And we haven't even gotten to the unshakable kingdom part yet.
I know, right? This chapter's got so much.
All right, we need a minute to process. This is some serious food for thought. But before we jump into the unshakable kingdom, what's resonating with you so far? What's challenging your understanding of Hebrews 12? Let these ideas simmer a bit. We'll be back to unpack the rest of this awesome chapter.
So this unshakable kingdom that Hebrews 12 talks about.
Yeah, verses 26, 29 really shift gears. They make us look ahead, to what's beyond this life. And it starts with God shaking not just the earth, but heaven too. What's that about? That's like cosmic.
I know, right? It's this powerful image meant to make us think about what really lasts, Everything we see, everything we depend on, it's temporary. Stuff, achievements.
Right.
Even our bodies. But there's something that stays, something unshakable.
God's kingdom.
Exactly. And that's where our hope is, in this unshakable kingdom we're receiving. It's not something we wait for. We're receiving it now, even while we're dealing with all the ups and downs of life.
Wait, so if we're already receiving it, how should that affect us today? How we live, our routines, relationships, even the tough stuff.
That's the big question, isn't it? It should change everything, how we see things. If we get that we belong to this unshakable kingdom, our values, what we prioritize, even how we react to challenges should show that.
So instead of getting all caught up in the anxieties of this world, we can have peace, knowing that our security is in something much bigger, something eternal.
Absolutely. Knowing that makes us free to live differently. We can face anything because our foundation is in something that can't be moved.
That makes me think about those witnesses we talked about before. They went through so much, but they held on to this hope. How can their stories inspire us to have that same confidence? Especially when things get rough.
Those stories are amazing. They show us that it's possible to live with joy, even when things are hard.
Right.
When your heart is set on something eternal, it's like they're saying, hey, we ran this race, we saw the finish line, and trust us, it's worth it.
Sometimes it feels like we're trying to live in two realities at once. This world with all its problems. But also being part of this unshakable kingdom. How do we balance that? It's like being pulled in two directions.
It's a tension, for sure. But Hebrews 12 tells us that this kingdom isn't way off in the future. It's here now, affecting how we live. It's like having dual citizenship, and our loyalty to that unshakable kingdom should guide everything we do, even the ordinary stuff.
So it's not about escaping this world, but living in it differently.
Yes, with our focus on something else. But it's not just about gritting our teeth. The writer also talks about gratitude.
Gratitude. Why is that so important?
Because when you really get what we've been given, gratitude just flows naturally. The writer says, let us give thanks, and through this let us offer worship pleasing to God in devotion and awe. We're thankful because we recognize this incredible gift, this kingdom that can't be taken from us.
That reminds me of what you said about God's discipline being good for us. If we believe that, if we trust that God's working things out, even the tough times can become opportunities for gratitude, right?
Exactly. Being thankful helps us see things differently. To see even the hard times through God's love and faithfulness, we can acknowledge the pain without losing sight of the big picture of what God might be doing through it all.
It's like gratitude makes what we have enough. But then the chapter ends with, our God is a devouring fire. That sounds scary. How does that fit with approaching God with joy?
It's a strong image, and I think it's supposed to make us feel both awe and respect. Not fear, but understanding his holiness. And that fire, it might sound intimidating, but it represents his purifying love, his desire to refine us and bring us closer.
So, two truths at the same time. God's a consuming fire, but also a loving Father who disciplines us, welcomes us into his kingdom. How do we actually live that out?
That's where it gets personal. It's letting God's love and grace change us from the inside. It's accepting his discipline, even when it hurts, knowing it's making us who we're meant to be, and it's living with excitement for the fullness of his kingdom that's coming.
So we're not just waiting around. We're taking part now by how we choose, how we react, just how we live in the world.
Exactly. It brings us back to running that race, keeping our eyes on Jesus, knowing he already ran it and is cheering us on.
This has been amazing. Talking about the witnesses, God's discipline, the unshakable kingdom. It feels like we just scratched the surface. What about you listening? What stands out? What are you thinking about? We'd love to hear your thoughts as we finish up this deep dive into Hebrews 12. Wow, it's incredible how everything connects, endurance, discipline, holiness. And then this unshakable kingdom. It paints such a powerful picture of what a life of faith really means.
It does. For me, one of the most striking things is that image of the great cloud of witnesses. We're not alone in this race. We've got this incredible legacy of faith behind us. These men and women who face such incredible challenges, yet they never wavered in their belief. Their stories are there to inspire us, to remind us that if they could endure, we can too.
I love that. Like they're on the sidelines cheering us on. Keep going. We know it's tough, but it's worth it. But sometimes, honestly, it's hard to see the reward when you're right in the middle of a struggle. So how do we hold on to that hope of the unshakable kingdom when we're facing hardship?
I think that's where faith comes in. It's about trusting that even when we don't get it, God is working everything out for good, for those who love him. It's about holding on to that promise that he won't leave us, even when we're walking through fire.
But what about those times when it feels like more than fire? Like we're being punished, not disciplined.
Right.
How do we square that with a loving God?
Those are hard questions. I don't think there's any easy answers. But maybe it goes back to perspective. Remember we were talking about Jesus enduring the cross, for the joy set before him. He could see past the pain to the purpose. What if we could do that too? What if instead of asking why, we focused on who? On the God who's with us in our suffering, who promises to never leave us, and who's using those painful experiences to shape us, to make us more like him.
So trusting his heart, even when we don't understand his hand. Believing that he's doing something good even when it doesn't feel good.
Yes, exactly. And that's a journey, not a destination. We'll have times of doubt, of questioning, of crying out. But God is there, even in those moments, holding us, whispering his love. And he's inviting us to draw strength from him, lean into his promises, and let him use even our brokenness to make something beautiful.
That's so encouraging. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to pretend everything's okay when it's not. We can come to God with all our questions, our doubts, our raw emotions, and he's right there with us. But how do we put that into action? How do we live like citizens of this unshakable kingdom while we're still here?
I think it starts with changing our priorities. If we really believe this world isn't our true home, that we have this inheritance that can never be taken away.
Right.
Then our choices, our relationships, how we live should show that. It's about investing in what lasts and what matters forever.
So living with different values, a different view of what's important.
Yeah.
Choosing love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, generosity over greed. Knowing that the things of this world fade, but the fruit of the Spirit, those things last.
You got it. It's about aligning our hearts with God's heart, with his kingdom values. Pursuing holiness, not because we have to, but because we want to be more like him. And living with a sense of excitement, knowing the best is yet to come.
This deep dive into Hebrews 12 has been so rich, so thought-provoking.
It really has.
We've covered so much. Endurance, discipline, holiness, gratitude, and of course, the unshakable kingdom waiting for us. It's a lot to take in. But I think it comes down to this. We're invited to live as citizens of a kingdom that can never be shaken. A kingdom where love reigns, where justice wins, where God's glory is fully revealed.
And that invitation isn't just for some far-off future, it's for right now. It's a call to embrace God's presence in our lives today, to let his grace transform us, to live with a hope that anchors us through anything.
So what will you do with this invitation? How will you let the truth of Hebrews 12 change your life, your choices, your relationships? We encourage you to keep exploring this chapter, to really dig deep and let its message take root in your heart.
Because when you understand who God is, what he's done for us, and the unshakable kingdom he's prepared, it changes everything. It gives us a reason to endure, a reason to hope, and a reason to live with a joy that can never be taken away.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. May you be filled with the peace and hope of that unshakable kingdom as you continue to run your race with endurance, eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.